Welcome to the Paint and Ink video channel. I am working on a few Zombicide miniatures. I thought it'd be a cool idea to display some of the different skin tones I've been using and the variations of the color blends or the effects that have been placed for these guys with a lot of the blood. Obviously there's going to be a lot of blood, they're zombies. And right now I'm using for my blends, it's all Citadel brand. We have for the shading the Agrax Earth Shade, and I thought it'd be cool to explain how a lot of the, let me see if I get in focus. There, focus. You can do it, you can do it. Alright, so we have this little mini, and I'm kind of working on, I've already got a few of the shade in the back end of it, kind of showing off that dirty look. Have a few highlights over the pants, and his skin is that brightish green. A cool way to do that with shading, if you have the earth shade, you can go ahead and scoop some up. So let's say we have, he's a little too bright. I like to dumb out at least from the edges. I'll start applying that. And it has a nice little tarnished brown look. Definition around the nose. Yeah, so I've already done a lot of the eye work, giving them that like glowish white eye. I almost went with that green glow to make them look a little more that necromancy. But once I highlighted the hair, I'm going to go in and just kind of darken things out. I don't want them to be a little too bright. See, I'm already giving it a little bit of that shadow around the nose. That's usually what I try to focus is around nose bridge and trying to get all that definition, especially from the eye sockets. Some of these will end up drying a little too glossy, so it's always a good idea to get some matte varnish, especially if you're going to be using your miniatures a lot more for tabletop gameplay. They're going to be handled a little more. It's always a good idea to just varnish them up. I know sometimes if you coat too much, it'll mess with the true vibrance of your colors, so just be careful with spraying it. A little bit of shoulder work. I feel like the highlights are in the front. It's a little too dark in the back. Kind of just, this is a stipple method, and with highlight colors, it's not jabbing it directly. It's off in an angle. I just want to kind of accent the shoulder a little more from the back. When we play with these miniatures on a board game, you're viewing all angles, so it's a good idea to keep in mind that the angles are, it's helpful to kind of move it around. Obviously this isn't like they're not display miniatures. You're going to be moving them around, so it's cool that you take into consideration all angles, those golden angles of your miniatures. In the trap area, what I'm doing is I'm going into the orc flesh, the base, and I'm kind of using it from the wet palette. I'm kind of dragging it away so that it acts, you can barely see it on the brush, but it's on there. Let me see if I can get a little bit more so you can tell. There you go, it's a little more visible. Just only on highlighted areas. Just the calf. It's like edge highlighting, you're just kind of following alongside of the raised edges. I feel like sometimes if you manipulate the stipple a certain way, while you're stippling, you can use it as texture, create like little texture. So imagine some of these guys might have crackly skin. If you guys have ever seen any of the Walking Dead comics, when they illustrate the zombies, they have crackled skin, they have a lot of the sick, ill flesh tones. That's what I kind of went for underneath the shirt, to bring out a lot of that. So I thought that'd be cool to implement that. So on the palette, this is for the blood texture, I'm using that red, base red, and this is basically what I'm using to go back and forth if I'm using my base tones in here, and if I want to go and highlight, I'll kind of bring it in and create that mid-tone between the two blends. And this is, the consistency is kind of diluted, so you see it's almost like a wash or a glaze. And I know if I need to go lighter in between, once I layer the brighter work flesh, I'm gonna kind of pull in from both. So I'll have another set. So this is kind of like, if you imagine a line in between your each different color on the palette, it'll be the lightest to darkest. In between here, I mean, let's say you're kind of short on time, and you know you only have about 30 to an hour to paint. I'm obviously not going to put out too much ink and waste it. I'm going to kind of pick and choose my colors and have them mentally. I'll have the alignment, so I'll say, okay, these are my lighters, and this is going to be the mid area, so I'll start dragging everything towards the center, and it's just easier that way. This kind of creates a recipe. It's easier to reference to. I have some fun technique to show for this guy, since he doesn't really have the red. I have a dry brush. This is a generic makeup dry brush. So what I do is with the red, let me try to bring it in the camera. So I have the red here. I sometimes use a non-porous surface, kind of like these little plastic pellets. But some of the red, I didn't use too much water in the area, so I don't have to put it on a surface that isn't going to be as absorbent. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on where the brush, how it looks like on here. And then, so this has kind of like a curved front end of it, the tip. And what I do is, with that in mind, I kind of start off the side of the shirt as I'm turning it, slowly building it. It almost looks like pink, but now I'm kind of sketching where I want the red to be. And I know certain parts of the brush are going to be a little more filled with the paint, so then I'm a little more careful when I'm going to start. Okay, you know what, I know that there's it's a little bit loaded in a certain area, so I'm going to have to use the angles of the brush. And as I'm basically stippling also with the dry brush. So if you can imagine, if I'm stippling the miniature, it's almost like turning it. As I'm turning it, it creates these natural little dots, which could be like blood drip. It can be like a splatter effect. So these guys are usually ripping through stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and go a little bit on the sleeve and the hand, not too much. Give it a little more of a natural look. Obviously a little bit on the side of the face or the jaw, that mouth area, but you see there's a little bit in this side. Maybe balance your miniature out, kind of like it dragged something along or just stuck a 10 into something, just ripped it up. And it's cool. I mean, you can go crazy with it, but I've seen some people go overboard with the blood sometimes, and I'm like, you know what, if you put a lot of work into the bottom of everything, like your the shirts and the detail, don't muddy it up with a bunch of red. I mean, you can, but if that's the case, just dip the whole miniature in red. I don't think you want to do that. So the back, I purposely left it a little darker because I wanted to do a little bit more of this red texture, and then I wanted to show off some dry brushing over that, and it gives it a whole different effect, almost like it's older blood. Sometimes you could blend in the brown, like brown colors, to make it look like that rust, realistic blood. Let's try that. If you're going to be using your dry brush throughout your paint session, I mean, obviously you want to try to clean off as much of the ink possible or the colors that you're using, but you don't have to. I always just kind of make sure most of it is off. When you're done, then you can maybe completely go through it and give it a good cleaning. But there's that. Pull out a color that's a little more closer to that. So we can use like a white. Let's see here. This is. All right. So for dry brushing, the back of the zombie that has already kind of on his, he has like that whitish gray suit going on. So I can zoom this guy in. There you go. So you can see his eyes. I use that, kind of use a little bit of the white to bring out the pupil area, and then gave it a little bit of a green glow with a contrast green. And that's the, you see how it looks a little more textured, not just dry brush. You're not just putting random red all over the place. You're actually trying to texture it like it's a realistic approach towards where blood would splatter. Now the back part, I like to use certain grays for darker blending if you're highlighting blacks. This one here is Mechanicus standard gray, and then I have a P3 white. So those two will be for the dry brushing. I'm gonna start using, let's see here. Kind of tell which tone it's gonna be at. The value of the gray. So you can maybe see, all right, it's gonna be somewhere in between of this. So same concept. The brush has a kind of like a curve. So let's check this out. Still using your, just keep in mind where the reflection of the lightest area of his back is gonna be. I'm gonna start kind of stippling, but I'm also brushing down from that top portion of it. And naturally you'll start seeing around the shoulders, those will start catching the colors a little faster because of the technique. Now, the way I'm approaching it, let me show you in a side glance. So I'm kind of going from here, pushing it down. So it's still dry brushing, but now it's at an angle like this. So almost the same way we stipple with our thinner brush. We have this, which is a wider front end, and I'm just gonna start giving it a little bit of that texture and work from there. Keep in mind all the raised areas that would be visible still. And then you'll see that you are gonna match the back of the zombie towards also with what the front looks like.